Brian Hook joining me now from Washington. He is the U.S. Special Representative for Iran and Senior Policy Advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Brian, it's good to have you with us. There will be people watching this saying, who would have known there was anything or anyone left to sanction in Iran? Why these entities and why now, sir?
Well, because we continue to monitor the threats to peace and security that Iran presents, and when we identify them, we take action to counter or neutralize them. Iran uses shipping networks by land, sea, and air to move missiles and nuclear items into places like Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, around the Middle East. And so today, Secretary Pompeo and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin sanctioned all of those organizations, whether it's Mahan Air or eSail or Irisl and another shipping network, so that we can do everything we can to stop these weapons from proliferating around the Middle East.
What concrete evidence do you have that Iran is planning new provocations against U.S. troops and interests in this region of the Middle East?
Well, Becky, much of that is classified. Since May, we have seen an increase in Iran's attempts to threaten American interests and to threaten our partners. Because we have enhanced our force posture in the region, since May we've put in an additional 14,000 troops. We've enhanced our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. We know that this has helped to disrupt and deter many of the attacks that the regime has been hoping to execute. We're going to continue to stay vigilant and do what we can to protect our interests and the interests of our partners and allies.
You have argued, and you continue to argue, that the economic pressure exerted by the U.S. Serves the demands of the Iranian people for a major change in the policies of the Islamic Republic. But Brian, what is very clear is that the forces gaining influence in Iran are the hardliners loyal to the supreme leader. Moderates and reformers are, quite frankly, being hung out to dry as the deep state gains more power, not less. We've already seen evidence at home that the regime is prepared to use force. Clearly, the lesson of Syria, you can be brutal and still hold on to power. Do you believe there is a risk that the effect of U.S. sanctions is that the Islamic Republic is not weakening but getting stronger? Some experts suggesting it is headed for a military dictatorship at this point.
We see an entirely different assessment. We see now the deadliest political crisis in the history of the Islamic Republic, and they have had to kill as many as 1,000 people or more. They have injured over 2,000 people, and they arrested 7,000 to 8,000 people. You have wide-scale protests in Lebanon, wide-scale protests in Iraq. What we're seeing from the peoples of each of these three countries is that they want their country back. And they're tired of Iran trying to export its model of domination and sectarian violence. They would like to see an end to the corruption. They would like to see better jobs. And so we're very pleased with how people have been demanding a more representative government in all three of those states.
Let me ask you this. Iraq, Libya, Syria, when has the U.S. ever effected regime change successfully with the use of U.S. sanctions?
But we're not doing regime change. And so I would question the premise of your question. The future of Iran is going to be decided by the Iranian people. It will not be decided by the United States government. What we are looking for is a change in behavior. And many of the things that we are asking the regime to do differently, it's the same thing the Iranian people are. They're tired of seeing tens of billions of dollars spent in Syria, on Assad, and on Hezbollah and Hamas. Today, your average Hezbollah fighter makes more than your average Iranian firefighter. And the Iranian people are tired of seeing their wealth spent on foreign adventures while they struggle.
And there is not a single Iranian who is likely to argue with that point. The problem is, and I put this to you again, this campaign of maximum pressure is only strengthening. I'm talking to sources all over the region. It is strengthening, not weakening, this regime. This is a regime which is going nowhere, sir.
Becky, you're the only person I've heard making this argument. Everything that I've seen in print and on television is quite the opposite. The regime is much weaker today. They are, as I said, facing their deadliest political unrest in their history. I don't know how you can argue that somehow they're winning.
All I'm saying is that we see evidence of a strengthening of hardliners versus a weakening of moderates and reformers.
So one of the things that we don't get into this, I think the Obama administration got lost in this sort of parlor game of empowering moderates and sort of weakening the hardliners, and that led them into an Iran nuclear deal that in 1 month or in 1 year is going to end the UN arms embargo, because they thought that in 5 years' time the moderates would be empowered. If you're in the Iranian government, you're a hardliner. And so what we've been trying to do is to sort of accept Iran's expansionist foreign policy for what it is and do everything we can to reverse the gains that were made under the Iran nuclear deal. And we're very pleased with what we are seeing across the region. The regime is weaker, and so are its proxies, and we expect that to continue.
The prisoner swap this past weekend has been applauded as a possible step forward. The first time Iran and the Trump administration, quite frankly, have agreed on anything. The president taking to Twitter to say, see, the two countries can make a deal. What is the president suggesting, sir?
Well, I think it sort of speaks for itself. The president said after we were able to get the American he was innocent, he was wrongly detained, and he was in an Iranian prison for 3.5 years. But we were able to negotiate a deal with the Iranians. I traveled to Zurich, Switzerland over the weekend after negotiating his release with the Iranians through the Swiss. So I think it is something that we can build on. I hope it's a first step, and we are going to be requesting a consular dialogue with the Iranians so that we can get the remaining innocent Americans out of Iran's prisons.
Which is, of course, incredibly important, as it is for other countries to be involved in doing the same. Let me just put this to you. Robin Wright, who is one of the most insightful journalists writing about Iran, says that her sources claim, quote, the administration usurped the narrative after almost 3 years of lethargic diplomacy and claimed that they initiated these negotiations and did much of the legwork, often despite resistance and roadblocks imposed by Trump's current and former envoys. With respect, sir, meaning you, your response?
Robin Wright has bad sources, and the Iranian regime yesterday said everything that you need to know, rejecting the narrative that Robin is putting forward.
Well, a little I want to move on to Iraq here, because a little over a month ago, hundreds of leaked intelligence reports offered a detailed portrait of just how aggressively Tehran has worked to embed itself in Iraqi affairs. We are seeing video here of Iraqis trying to set fire to the Iranian consulate. Look, the government has promised early elections. How will Iraqis ensure these elections are clean when we know the Iranian influence is so powerful inside the country? And can you categorically say that the US will not meddle in that election?
Well, unlike Iran, we support an Iraq that is sovereign and stable and independent. Qasem Soleimani would very much like to see Baghdad under the complete domination of Tehran. And so we have a very different view of the future. I would say to the Iraqi people, if you want to see your future under Iranian domination, look at how Iran treats its own people. This is a regime that prioritizes ideology over the welfare of its own people. It is highly sectarian. It has no interest in supporting a prosperous and stable Iraq, and certainly that is the future that we would like to see. And so Secretary Pompeo has made very clear that he supports those peaceful protesters, and we have condemned violence against them, and we have also condemned all efforts by Iran to dominate Iraq.